Welcome and thank you for your services. I'm your host, Andre Bowser. I'm also a military reservist based in Chicopee. And my guest today is Mrs. Stephanie Shaw. She's the Veterans Services Officer and Director for Chicopee. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, good morning.
So you yourself, you're a veteran as well.
I am, yeah.
And you served in which branch?
I joined the Army National Guard when I was 17.
When you were 17.
Yeah.
So your parent had to go to you, to the recruiter office, and sign you in essentially because at that age it requires parental consent.
It did. When I was 16, I told my mom I wanted to join.
Wow.
And I told the recruiter, next year, my birthday, come find me. And he didn't. So 2 weeks later, I went and found him.
Okay.
And he came to the house and we signed.
And that's called tenacity. So now where'd you grow up and where did you join the military from?
Feeding Hills. I grew up in Feeding Hills my whole life.
Oh, the area?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm originally from Western Mass. I've always been here. And it's a funny story. Everyone has a reason why they join. And I think mine is comical, I suppose. When I was 16, my high school sweetheart joined. He was the grade above me. He was 17. And he came home from drill weekends and tell me all the cool stuff they did. And one day I said, yeah, that's really cool. And his dad looked at me and said, you couldn't do it.
Ooh, challenge.
I said, watch me. And when my recruiter came to me to sign, he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, what's the hardest job a female can do? Now, he might have lied to
Wow.
me. He might have had a quota to fill, I don't know. But I joined as a military police officer.
Now that's a tough job.
It can be. It's a good job.
And I say that as an Air Force reservist. A lot of individuals who've never been in the military, they might not know, but typically our bases overseas would consist of an air base surrounded by an Army base in many cases. And so the tip of the spear in that instance would be the military police officers who are standing guard protecting the base. And in your time serving, so you joined again in what year was it?
2000.
2000, and you left at what point?
I went to basic after I graduated high school. I was able to drill while I was still in high school for that year. I graduated at 17, and in July of 2001, I shipped to basic in Missouri.
Missouri.
Turned 18 at boot camp.
Wow.
Did not tell anyone, thank goodness.
Yeah. The birthday party at boot camp might be a little different than what you would expect, or
not a fun one.
Yeah.
No party
yeah.
hats.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, and then I came home and I stayed with my unit, which was really beneficial to go to basic with almost a year of experience of equipment, training, terms, expectations, I guess. So yeah, it was a good time.
So the breadth of your military service was from 2000 until?
Military service ended in 2006, but I've had military-connected jobs. It's really guided my whole career path, which was really unexpected, but a blessing.
So from 2000 to 2018, you've in some form or capacity been affiliated with the military.
Yeah, I have.
And when you served, were you active duty, a reservist, a Guards member?
I was in the Guard.
National Guard, okay.
We did our standard, well actually, September 11th happened while I was at Advanced Individual Training, 9/11, 2001. Wow. So 9/11 has a very unique meaning to me. I didn't know the impact of that day until I came home in November.
Because there was no TV in your training. You were focused on your training, and the world is going crazy around you.
It was September 11th, and we were doing room inspections. And it took 4 hours for the drill sergeants to come after we were done and being prepared. And they walked through our room. They didn't look at a single thing and said, we've been attacked, we're going to war, buckle up. And they walked out.
Those were the words. We've been attacked, we're going to war, buckle up.
Yep. And then one of the females that I was with, her significant other was at the Pentagon. So after they made sure she had contact with her family and he was okay, they pulled us into the day room. We got to watch about 5 minutes of footage. Well, I recall it might have been a little bit more, but it wasn't hours. It wasn't, at length. And then we went back to training. And for the next couple weeks, we would have a little bit of TV time here and there, and some people would turn it on and you'd see another couple glimpses. And then when I came home in November, It was going to the holidays. And so it wasn't on the news every day as it was. So when the first anniversary came around, that's when I really saw the impact that it had on our country. And by that point, I knew my unit was going to be deploying. And it was the fall of 2002. We knew it was coming up, and I found out right before Christmas that we were going to leave in January for Afghanistan.
Wow. So now it's the new year.
Yeah.
And when are you boots on the ground in Afghanistan?
We mobed at a Fort Drum in January, and I got to Afghanistan the end of February.
And you are 18 years old.
19 at that point, but
You're
yeah,
19
young.
at that point. And you're in Afghanistan. The new year has just passed. The year after the attack, pretty much, as you said, you were engaged in a lot of activities, so it took a year for it all to sink in. And by the time it sunk in, you were at the front lines. Tell me a little bit about that experience. What is it like to be 19 in a foreign country on the other side of the world?
One thing I have to say is the military trains you and your comrades very well for the job that you're going to do. So I felt prepared, as odd as that is to say now, because at 19, how could I have ever been prepared? I don't think I understood the significance and how monumental. When I enlisted, it was the National Guard doesn't go anywhere, and then 9/11 happened, and we were going somewhere. So it was very surreal. I remember the plane ride over there. We were in an Air Force plane without seats, like aisles of seats. We were just in seats that were on the sides of the walls. We had all of our trucks on pallets in front of us.
Wow.
It took more than a day worth of traveling to get there. And I remember they dropped the hatch and they got the vehicles off. And I remember walking out of the plane and being stunned by the scenery. It was, I don't recall if it was sunset or dusk or sunrise, but I know it was a transition, and the sky was red, and there was beautiful mountains, not
Surrounding
snow-capped mountains, but just the mountain ranges and the colors, and just feeling in awe. And then I took my first breath, and it was unpleasant. It's not a sweet-smelling place, and it was just, and we landed in Bagram, and we bunked down, and 48 hours later, I was sent to Kabul, and that's where I lived for 8 months.
What's amazing is, so you land in Bagram, or some would call it Bagram, on this air base. And just as I described to you in the normal scenario, there's this air base, which is essentially an Air Force base, surrounded by this huge Army base. And again, you're at the front lines. When did you, so you put your bag down, and are you at the gate that same day? Are you in a rotation eventually and ensuring that the Army base and the internal Air Force base are safe to function and to do the duty that they're there to do?
We were there so early, there was no Army base.
Wow.
When I got there, it was all air.
Wow.
And then they split up our company. We had 4 platoons, and they kept one in Bagram to help with perimeter and convoy security. I was a field MP, not a garrison MP, so I wasn't writing tickets. I wasn't doing law enforcement on a base. We did a lot of convoy security. We did perimeter security, entry control point.
In Kabul.
So I was one of 2 platoons that went to Kabul, and we were stationed at, the acronym was KMTC, the Kabul Military Training Center. It was actually the facility where the Americans were training the Afghan army. I was stationed and assigned to a special forces unit, and we provided perimeter and convoy security. I did get to work at one point training the first company of Afghani military police. It was an incredible experience, to say the least.
What is that like? There's a language barrier for many of the Afghani and for many of the Americans, so they're interpreters. Did some of the Afghan police understand you, or was it always a delayed communication interaction, so you had to say something in as plain as possible and then have it translated? The
interpreters were phenomenal. You really would conversationally speak with the local community, and they would translate. Again, my experience with the locals was more limited. I was a gunner. I was lower enlisted. We would drive through the villages. We would see the families. We would see the nomads. The trainees, we were we kept our distance from, in my experience. And again, there was that delay. I think one of the biggest takeaways was we worked very closely with the Special Forces. We worked very closely across the street from our compound was the ISAF, International Security Allied Forces. So the Italians, the Germans, and the French were stationed there, along with several other countries. So getting to work with and engage with other countries' service members was really memorable for me.
What memory stays today? What memory can you recall in a snap?
The little Italian pizzeria.
On base or at the
street,
ISAF?
Across the street, yeah. We didn't have the best accommodations, so we had some pretty good chow. Fridays we'd have lobster and steak.
Wow.
And
that steak flew a long way to get into your stomach.
And some days it tasted like it. But it was good. It was good. But the ISAF guys would really enjoy our chow because it was different from them. And so when we'd have the opportunity, we'd have to go over there sometimes for missions or an alliance conversation or just to engage with them. Sometimes it wasn't often, but we'd occasionally go over there. And I remember we worked 12-hour days. So the first half of the deployment I was on days, the second half I was on nights, and I was on night shift. It was my first day off because if you had a day off, you usually got put on a detail. And someone was like, "We're going to ISAF. We're going to go get pizza." And I walked in, and the Italians brought this little short Italian guy who would make paninis and pizzas.
Wow.
And the Germans, they brought a liquor store. We weren't allowed to touch it anyway.
That's funny.
But it was just really kind of funny. Like, we brought our trucks, and they brought these amenities.
Trucks, guns, bullets, and
yeah.
The Italians had some pizza. I'm sure they had trucks, guns, bullets too. But
They did. But it was those. I think those quality of life things are what I remember the most, because those were things that we didn't have. So it was just kind of interesting, and everyone was really nice. We'd go to the Italian compound for lunch, not the pizzeria, but they had wine on the tables with this expansive antipasta bar, and that's just their big meal is lunch, and it's a traditional Italian lunch. It's what they eat, and I remember all of us just being like, "This is amazing," and they'd come and have steak and lobster with us on Friday. Yeah,
you were coming from a tent with MREs, but steak and lobster on Fridays.
On Fridays, yeah. Okay. No, the chow was pretty good. Wow. The other thing I remember was sitting in the chow hall the day that we invaded Iraq. I was in Afghanistan that day and watching it on the news and going, it was different. It's not like this is worlds away from me. Like, no, that's the country next door. And seeing what else was going on in the world. That day was pretty cool, watching that, eating lunch.
And for anyone who's never been to the Middle East, I recall, like yourself, being young, maybe 20, maybe 21, I can't recall now the specific age, but I was in Bahrain in the Navy, and when I stepped off of my aircraft carrier and hopped in the motor well boat and went to coastal Bahrain, this is when I was in the Navy before my Air Force service, I didn't understand that the earth could get that hot. It was 120 degrees, and that was a good day to them. It was a good day. It was like a day to not go outside and pass out. Meanwhile, I felt like I was going to pass out the entire time. So when you talk about just coming off of the back of the aircraft after the hatch drops, and you talk about the smell, despite the beauty of the scenery with the mountains surrounding you, there's a certain heat, and there's a certain ever-presence of sand.
Surprisingly, no.
No.
No, we got there in February, and it would snow in the winter, and it rained through the spring, and it was mud. And I was on the day shift for the first half of our deployment, so from like February to May, if you will. I was on the day shift, and it was very, very much climate-wise like here. It would drop down really low in the night, and it would get comfortably warm during the day. Towards the end of May, it would start to get, hotter, but it was very dry where I was. So they didn't have the humidity that we are used to here in New England. So it wasn't super noticeable. And then I was lucky enough to be on the night shift during the summer. And I remember those that were on day shift during the summer, the heat was oppressive.
Yes.
For sure. It was 120, but it felt like our high 90s without the humidity.
I see. I was in Bahrain in the summer, so we had different experiences.
And being Navy on the coast, I'm sure the humidity was different than middle of Afghanistan.
It's amazing. We could spend a lot of time talking about your first couple years in the military.
I'm sure, yeah.
But you have a rich and detailed experience of not just military service, and like the name of our show, thank you for your service, because I never served in Afghanistan. As a veteran and as a reservist, still to this day, I've served in other parts of the country. But so you get out of the military, and as you said, 2006 was it? What was that transition like? You know, leaving the National Guard and all that you did at such a pivotal time in history. What is it like to leave the military, and what did you do at first?
So the reason why I got out was I had met my first husband in the unit right before we deployed. And after we came home, we got married, and we had wanted to start a family. And being dual military, we decided didn't want to train with people I wasn't willing to deploy. And I wasn't willing to leave my kids. That was a line I couldn't cross for myself. And as a family, we decided that he had been in several years previous to me and had a longer career at the time. So he stayed in and I got out. And I spent 4 years, about 4 years as volunteering with his family readiness group. We started our family. We had a daughter, and so I would help with the requirements of the family days, the holiday parties, keeping in touch with supporting the families. And then in December of 2010, I was hired by the Massachusetts National Guard Family Program Office to be a case manager and a deployment asset for those military families. And I spent 7 years supporting the Mass National Guard through deployments, and it evolved as a contractor position into supporting veterans throughout Western Mass. And I got to know a lot of resources, a lot of programming, and a lot of individuals that were in that same network of supporting the military, supporting veterans. And when the contract position ended in 2017, February 2017, the contract ended, and I chose not to join with the new company. And it was later that spring that the position for the Chicopee office opened up. And at this point, my first husband and I decided that path wasn't something we wanted together, and we had split up. We had 2 kids, and I had reconnected with actually my high school sweetheart, who's the reason why I joined in the first place. So we got remarried, and we decided now, as our family was growing additionally, we decided, yes, I'll take that leave. We'll figure out what else is out there, see if any of my network would propose an opportunity. And the Chicopee position opened up, and I applied, and so that brings us to now.
We'll talk about destiny and fate bending in your favor, because you are now the Director of Veteran Services for the City of Chicopee. And I can say that Chicopee is in one of the top cities that I've lived in that's been supportive of the military. It's residents who've never actually served, coming out to events such as the air show, the Greater New England Air Show that Westover just had.
Yeah.
I know that Barnes hosts these air shows. And it's not just about the Air Force, because Army units, Marines, Navy, they participate as well.
They do.
In fact, several years ago, the Navy's Blue Angels flew. So these air shows, they're not Air Force specific. It's really about showing the citizenry as much as we can about the military that they fund and support. So I recall being stationed at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, and the Air Force community surrounding that Air Force Base and the citizens surrounding it were just hugely supportive, and Chicopee is a huge city in that respect as well.
It is.
So congrats to you in your new position as the director, and in a later episode we'll talk more about the various services that are offered.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I want to say is, in my day job, I work for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. I'm a public affairs officer, and we often go out into the community and we sing praises about Massachusetts and all of the vast services that are available for veterans.
Yeah.
And National Guards members, for example, many people do not know that if you join the National Guard in Massachusetts, you can go to State College for free.
Correct.
That benefit isn't necessarily given to federal reservists. Instead, we get tuition assistance to go to school. But that's a huge, huge boost. You have a young person such as yourself at the age of 17 whose parents walk you into the recruiter and sign something giving you permission, and you go off and serve your country. Who better to give, educational benefits to? So talking about educational benefits, did you take advantage and sort of, obviously, you took the advantage of the career path, but how about educationally? What did you do to prepare yourself to be in the role you're in?
I did utilize my education benefits. I got my associate's degree through STIC while I was still in the Guard, and then after I left the service, I continued with my post 9/11 benefits.
Excellent.
And went to Westfield State. I'm 2 courses shy of getting my degree, which is
excellent.
another fun fact about me is I have 5 kids, and my youngest is 7 months. So while I was finishing my final semester last semester, we were selling a house and having a baby, and I just started a new job, and it was just more than it was more than I could handle. I don't know about anybody else. So I had to withdraw. So I am looking to finish that up in the near future here. But it wasn't why I joined, but it was certainly a heck of a perk to be able to get my degree and not have student loans.
I'm in awe of you. 5 children, and you look like you're in your early 20s or so. But congrats to you. And I'll tell you right now, I did something similar. I used the GI Bill, and I went to school in Connecticut, and it took me about 10 years to finish my bachelor's. Most kids finish it in 4 years. But I used the GI Bill, and I spent many of those years, about 5, with Uncle Sam serving. But the beautiful thing about the Air Force, and I'll say, is there's a community college, but the Army, they also offer educational programs to their members, Marine Corps and Navy as well. So, in the time that you finish it, you still have a lot on your plate with 5 children. So let's talk a little bit about family, because I didn't realize that about you. So you have a 7-month-old?
I do.
And how old is your oldest?
11.
11 years old. Okay, that's a span there. All right.
Yeah.
And do you live in Chicopee?
I did.
Okay.
We just moved to Ludlow. The kids are great. I have 3 girls, 11, 4, and 3. I have 2 boys, 9 and 7 months old. My husband, you had mentioned earlier, he's still serving. He deployed to Iraq 06 to 07 as a truck driver with the transportation company with the Mass Guard.
Wow.
Now he is still drilling. He's still an MD soldier, but he's also a federal technician on Franklin Street in Westfield as a diesel mechanic. So being dual military, patriotism just runs rampant in our house. We try not to decorate with the American flag all the time, but we certainly enjoy celebrating our service. But I think for me, my family's Canadian. Both my parents were born in Canada, so I was the first person in my family.
You don't say, eh?
Not that part.
Okay.
Quebec and Nova Scotia.
I see.
But so I grew up I learned about American history in school, but it wasn't something prevalent at home. And I didn't have this following of, well, my grandfather served and this is why I want. So I've learned so much about military history, politics, even just American history since getting out of high school through this career path. And so I'm really excited for my kids to grow up with that in their heritage and in their daily lives and in their childhood. And my son and my daughter both talk about when they serve and I've been a veteran. I'm sorry, I am a veteran, I have served. And loving a veteran is the absolute hardest thing you can do. Loving a service member.
They have to be taken away so often. And
just understanding that you don't come first, especially with the National Guard. If the governor calls, he's gone. If something happens globally, he could be gone. And knowing that I don't come first is a really hard pill to swallow as a wife and having 5 kids at home.
How long till he retires?
Well, hopefully, it was supposed to be September, but now we're talking about him going longer than his 20 years. And it's just, I would rather put the uniform back on than
You're
have
not
to
too
face
old.
being I'm at borderline. There's a cutoff. But yeah, it's a lot harder being a service member's wife than it is to be the service member. And I can't imagine how emotional it'll be to be the parent of a service member. That's a role I haven't had to fill yet. I do work with a lot of Gold Star families, a lot of Blue Star mothers.
Wow.
And I can only empathize to a certain point. I do look forward to having the privilege to be the parent of a service member, but I think it's going to be an emotional roller coaster.
It sounds almost predestined for your children then, but to have
think
any
so.
of them expressed an interest,
Yeah.
they know that mom wore the uniform, they see dad wearing the uniform, and so they're expressing an interest.
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
They are.
Well, kudos, I just want to say kudos to your husband, because driving in those convoys, there are individuals who make it very unsafe for them.
Yeah.
So it's great that he's back home with you. I know that he's extending his service, but it sounds like you both have spent enough time in harm's way. So I really truly hope that that isn't the case in the future. And I just want to point out again that we definitely have to come back and we have to talk about all the services that are available to veterans. So we'll spend some time in the coming months just focusing on that, so that Chicopee residents and residents across the Pioneer Valley region understand that Massachusetts is a great state to live in, a great state to be a veteran, because the state really backs its veterans. So I want to thank you for coming on our show.
My pleasure. It's been fun.
Excellent. And I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for your service.